Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Crunch day at the Commons for Brexit. The Scottish Government argues key Brexit legislation undermines devolution. The first case of its kind in over a century. A man formerly cleared of raping a university student is being sued by the alleged victim for damages. MSPs debate whether a new cystic fibrosis drug should be made available on the NHS, following a campaign by Scottish patients.
Dear Miss Sturgeon, I'm writing to ask you to personally get involved to make sure that new drugs like Orkambi are made available to people with cystic fibrosis quickly.
Also in the programme. A pop-up orchestra petitioning the Scottish Government for free music lessons in Scotland schools.
And I'm live at the Grange in Edinburgh, where after the famous win over England at the weekend, Scotland's cricketers are now taking on Pakistan.
Good evening. It's been a day of high drama at Westminster as MPs debate crucial Brexit legislation. Of special significance to Scotland is the continuing row over powers returning from Brussels and the impact on the devolved nations. The Scottish Government argues Holyrood is being undermined. Well, let's cross to our Westminster correspondent David Porter. David, MPs have been in and out of the chamber all day. Where are we on the debate regarding the devolved nations?
Jackie, the short answer is on that aspect, we have made very little progress today. It has been a significant day here at Westminster, which began with an unexpected ministerial resignation and has ended with the UK government making a major concession on its wider Brexit strategy. But there is real frustration and anger as to how the devolution aspects of all this are being handled. Many people think that Scotland is in effect being shortchanged because of time constraints on the Commons, that they may get very little time to discuss how Scotland is going to be affected. As we speak, MPs have not even begun to debate the Scottish or other devolved nations aspects of what is going on. My colleague Andrew Kerr has been following the day's events.
Theresa May and her cabinet are trying to build a post-Brexit Britain. Many of their ideas are still under wrap, just like the Houses of Parliament.
Big Ben will also emerge renewed and refreshed. Inside the House of Commons, though, MPs have their own challenges after the House of Lords refreshed the EU withdrawal bill.
The legislation puts law from Brussels into UK laws.
European Union withdrawal bill consideration.
They're now voting in those changes. The Prime Minister swept in for the debate, but the Scottish Government accuses her of sweeping away Holyrood's powers. They say the key Brexit legislation today means a power grab on areas like environmental and food standards, and it must not be allowed on the statute book.
Well, I read it as an act of contempt for the devolved administrations, for Scotland, for Wales and for Northern Ireland. The Sole Convention, the convention by which Westminster does not legislate without the consent of the devolved administrations, has simply been thrown away, virtually without discussion.
Indeed, they say they might not cooperate with the UK government in the future. But here at Westminster, there's still surprisingly hope for a breakthrough.
Even at this late hour, even after the bill completes its passage today, we could come to an agreement on how we would operate, how the intergovernmental agreement would operate. And of course, our commitment is that we will always seek consent in relation to the frameworks that will come forward as a result of this bill.
Many want the UK government to change course in other fundamental ways.
Division, clear the lobby.
Back in the House, there was frustration from the SNP tonight as little time was left to debate the devolution issue. Throughout the day, though, the government won all the crucial votes.
It does seem strange, David, that there is just under 45 minutes left and they haven't even touched on the devolution aspect of this.
Yeah, it does seem extraordinary. That's partly the way that Westminster votes. They don't have electronic voting like Holyrood, so they physically have to troop in and out of lobbies to do that. Each vote takes about quarter of an hour. They have had a series of votes. They've been voting for over an hour and a half now, and they will probably carry on voting till at least 7 o'clock this evening. That would leave just a quarter of an hour for them to discuss aspects of devolution, including Northern Ireland and how it affects Scotland and Wales in the wider Brexit deal. It may well be that they actually don't get to discuss the Scottish aspects at all because they have to finish at 7:30. That will cause a lot of anger, I think, amongst Scottish MPs.
Thank you very much. A former St Andrews University student is suing a man who was cleared of raping her following a High Court trial 2 years ago. The landmark case is thought to be the first time in almost a century a woman has mounted a civil action in Scotland after an unsuccessful rape prosecution. Stephen Godden was at Edinburgh Sheriff Court.
The focus of today's hearing dates back to Freshers' Week at St Andrews University in September 2013. In the witness box, a former student repeatedly broke down in tears as she recounted details of a night out with friends, which she claims ended with her being raped in the bedroom of her flat. Now in 2015, Stephen Coxon from Greater Manchester stood trial at the High Court accused of raping the woman. He was acquitted after the jury found the case against him not proven. Today, Stephen Coxon was back in court, this time to defend a civil claim brought against him by the same woman who can't be named for legal reasons. He denies all the allegations made in the £80,000 claim for personal injury, thought to be the first time in almost a century that a civil action has been brought against someone previously cleared of rape in a criminal trial. Now, the key difference is that the burden of proof in a civil case is lower, the case determined on the balance of probabilities rather than beyond reasonable doubt. Now, Rape Crisis Scotland, they say that a number of women have spoken to them about the possibility of pursuing a civil action, but they say that the focus needs to remain on the criminal justice system. This hearing, meanwhile, evidence will continue tomorrow and is expected to finish at the end of next week.
A father who killed his 3-month-old daughter when she wouldn't stop crying has been jailed for 6.5 years. Traherne Williams threw baby Sophia onto a couch, causing catastrophic brain damage. Williams initially told a doctor she'd fallen. Passing sentence at the High Court in Glasgow, the judge, Lord Matthews, said Williams would have been jailed for 8 years, but for his guilty plea. MSPs are debating whether a new cystic fibrosis drug should be made available on the NHS. It comes after campaigners called for the drug, Orkambi, to be prescribed to Scottish patients. The drug was rejected for use by the Scottish Medical Consortium in 2016. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers reports.
Dear Miss Sturgeon, I'm writing to ask
Kelly
you to
Gallagher is
personally get
24.
involved to make
She
sure
lives
that
with
new
cystic
drugs like Orkambi
fibrosis.
are made available
She wrote to the
people
First
with
Minister
cystic
spelling out
fibrosis.
why she wants new drug treatments on the NHS.
I am 24 and have CF. My life expectancy is 31. All the times you go into hospital, if you've got IVs, you've got your doctors, you've got your bed, you've got all that stuff that costs, that's the same, probably just under the same amount of money it's going to cost for the drug. So why can't they, instead of taking you to hospital, have this drug that stops that or prevents it at least?
Orkambi slows down lung deterioration. It's a precision medicine that targets genes. Campaigners say it could benefit half of those with cystic fibrosis, but in 2016 the drug was rejected by the Scottish Medicines Consortium, who said the evidence wasn't there to justify its cost.
It's my finger.
In Skye, 23-year-old Hannah McDermott has added her voice to the campaign.
We hope that it would improve lung function primarily. For example, mine was at 45% just last month. So if I were back down at that level, it might help to improve it.
Cystic fibrosis is a devastating genetic disease.
In Parliament this evening, the case to have treatments like this on the NHS was under debate.
It is the beginning of a line of generic medicines that are coming along the line, and we're seeing them coming out thick and fast. Not just for this, but for multiple sclerosis and other cancers. I mean, all the fantastic advances.
The Health Secretary says talks with the drugs company are ongoing, and she's urged them to come back with a price that's fair.
Orkambi is not cheap, over £100,000 per person per year, but campaigners argue that it's cutting edge. But any decision on whether it becomes routinely available is not one for the Scottish Parliament. It'll be made by the Scottish Medicines Consortium. They say they welcome any resubmission of evidence about the drug. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The number of Scots seeking work during February to April was unchanged on the previous 3 months at 118,000. That left Scotland's headline unemployment rate at 4.3%. Over the past year, it's risen from 4% but remains very low by past standards. The latest figures suggest the proportion of Scots in work rose slightly to more than 3/4 of people of working age. Greenhouse gas emissions here have almost halved since 1990. The drop's been largely put down to the closure in 2016 of the Longannet power station. Latest figures show that levels in 2016 were 10% decreased on the previous year. Ministers announced last month that they're intending to set a target to reduce levels by 90% by 2050. Yesterday, we heard how hundreds of Scottish troops are once again serving in Iraq. Their job is to train the Iraqi security forces, who are still battling against attacks from Islamic State militants. Well, our reporter Cameron Buttle spoke to one soldier who's returned for his 3rd tour of duty, despite being seriously injured there in 2004.
I'm Kevin Stacey. I'm the Regimental Sergeant Major of the Black Watch 3rd Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland. My grandfather, my uncle and my dad, who've all managed to attain the position of Regimental Sergeant Major, which is a tremendous honour. It's some 115 years continuous service between the 4 of us. I've done a couple of tours of Northern Ireland. I've done, this is now my 3rd tour of Iraq. I was involved in the fight in the war aspect in 2003. I then came back again barely 11 months later in 2004. And now I'm obviously back here again in Iraq. In between that, I've managed to get a tour of Afghanistan and another tour of Northern Ireland. I was in a Warrior armoured fighting vehicle where an IED went off. Unfortunately, one of my young lads, a young driver there, Mark Ferns, cracking guy, who unfortunately lost his life in that incident, which is very, very sad. I sustained very serious injuries whereby I was almost on the, I wouldn't say on the point of death, but they thought I wasn't going to pull through. So injuries I sustained, I had a depressed skull fracture, which hopefully you can see inside my head there, size of 50p piece of skull missing, shrapnel wound to my shoulder, my ulnar and radial had been blown away at my right forearm as well. The soldiers of today want the tour of yesterday. They want the excitement. They want the rounds landing on the feet, landing on above the heads, on the walls and that sort of stuff. I always say to them, always counteract that with just be careful what you wish for, because ultimately it's great fun when the excitement, the buzz, it's unreal. But and it's great when you get back to barracks, back into camp or the FOB or the CP, and everyone is still there. But it's not so great when somebody's missing. I'm very proud to say I've done my piece and done my bit for Iraq. It's now some 15 years since I was here first time in 2003. From the way that some of the Iraqis have been interacting with us here in this camp has been very good, and they say that they're actually on their own, standing on 2 feet now, so that's a good thing.
Kevin Stacey in Iraq. Now, an array of musicians gathered in Glasgow today and formed a pop-up orchestra. It was to protest at cuts to music education and about increased charges for instrument tuition. Campaigners say fees in some local authority areas are now so exorbitant they may put children off learning music at all. Our arts correspondent Pauline McLean can tell us more.
Glasgow is one of the few local authorities who don't charge for music tuition. For most places, it's now the norm. And that's why these musicians wanted to send out a warning note this morning.
We're not talking about a few pounds here, a few pounds there. It's a lot of money that's being added to that parents are being asked for the children to learn musical instruments at the moment. So it's basically going to make a two-tiered system where only those can afford it.
The Scottish Government already invest in the Youth Music Initiative, which focuses on primary schools. But today's petition urges them to go further, ring-fencing money so that all local authorities can offer free music.
So those that are campaigning to continue to have music provision in their schools are doing the right thing. How we do that is a challenge. We know that there are challenges ahead, and that is why we want to work with local authorities, respecting their autonomy because they have the lead responsibility, but also with the Music Educational Partnership Group to see a way forward.
The campaign is called Change the Tune, and back in George Square they'd done just that. The Death March, now Ode to Joy, a nod to what Scotland could achieve in musical terms.
We've still got a good system in place and we just want it to stay that way, and please, we have to develop it, not dismantle it, because it's something that Scotland's world class at.
Pauline McLean, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Now it's just after 7:15. A reminder of tonight's main story. Crunch day at the Commons for Brexit. The Scottish Government argues key Brexit legislation undermines devolution. And still to come, Hollywood comes to Scotland. Well, the first letter of the famous sign does, as it begins a world tour. The Scottish Government has announced it's to publish an action plan to improve the lives of gypsy travellers. It'll include improvements for accommodation at traveller sites and to combat racism against the community. It comes as plans have been announced for the first retirement village for gypsy travellers. Our social affairs correspondent Rival Alderson reports.
It's the romantic image of gypsy travellers, firmly rooted in the past, but this independent, unconventional lifestyle brings with it problems for the 4,200 people who in the last census in Scotland identified themselves as gypsy travellers. In particular, their health has caused official concern. Researchers showed they use NHS services less than other members of the population. They're less likely to register with a GP and attend for screening or immunisation. And official figures estimate gypsy travellers' life expectancy is 10 years lower than the national average.
Potentially we're going to culvert this burn here. We are going to remove these overhead cables.
Jack Hendry wants to help address these problems with a retirement village for the gypsy traveller community in West Lothian.
I'm from the gypsy background myself, and the problem is that for the elderly gypsy travelling person, getting housing is very, very difficult. When when they get a certain age and it's operations, or they've got to be in a settled home. Unfortunately, they can't stay in the caravan, which we call the trailer, because hospitals will, they need to have a settled site.
He's lodged a planning application for 26 homes to be built on this site, along with a communal centre where health services can be provided. It'll be open to non-travelling elderly people in an attempt to break down the divide between travellers and the settled community.
Looking after ethnicity, the breakdown, the gypsy travelling community who are separated, who don't have enough accommodation. By building something like this, we hope, physically and mentally, to improve the health and well-being of all in the community.
The planning application has been made as ministers announced they'll publish an action plan to improve the lives of gypsy travellers in Scotland, with better accommodation and tackling racism against the community. Rival Alderson, reporting Scotland, Kirknewton.
Now, I hope this isn't the kiss of death, but we're all suddenly very interested in cricket, and the Scotland cricket team are in action again this evening, just days after that famous win over England. They're taking on Pakistan in Edinburgh, and Cerdyn Idzan is at the Grange for us now. Cerdyn.
Yes, good evening from fashionable Stockbridge in the nation's capital, where it would seem that cricket has rarely been as in vogue as it is now. The defeat of England on Sunday was Scotland's best ever result. They now have two 20 overs matches against Pakistan. The question being, can Scotland possibly do it again? Loud and proud, as you would be if your team was world number one in cricket's short form 20 overs game. It was quieter during Scotland's warm-up, a bit of football away from the wicket. Up next, Pakistan, following the famous win over England at the weekend. Another victory would surely help Scotland's ultimate aim of becoming a full member of the International Cricket Council.
We are really keen to do that. We are hopeful we might be able to do it within the next 2 or 3 years. I would draw a distinction between being a test nation and a full member of the ICC. They are actually slightly different. You might become a full member of the ICC and decide not to play tests immediately. We haven't reached that decision, we'd have to see. What we do know is that test matches are quite an expensive type of format of the game, and you've got to make a decision as to do you want to spend your money on that, or is it better to spend more money on grassroots or something like that.
And it seems Scotland would be welcomed at cricket's top table.
The way they played last week with England was incredible, like 300, and England never chased that much score, and it was a really good game, and you're hoping to a good game today as well.
I think Scotland have a very good case for becoming a test-playing nation, the same as Ireland have just become.
They're pretty good. They did well yesterday, 2 days ago, and they have a small chance of beating Pakistan.
Right now though, there's a match to play, with Scotland seeking to shake up the world of cricket for the second time in 3 days. So is another famous win on the cards? I have to say it's looking a little bit unlikely. Pakistan were 204 for 4 from their allotted 20 overs. Captain Sarfraz Ahmed top scored with 89. Shoaib Malik chipped in with 53 for Scotland. Alistair Evans took 3 for 23. In reply, well, Scotland are 107 for 4 right now, and I think a 5th wicket may just have fallen actually. So they need 98 runs from a remaining 5 overs. Frankly, I'm afraid that's just not going to happen. But it's been a fabulous evening's cricket here at the Grange. Fingers crossed though for the last 5 overs.
Oh, it certainly looks lovely, Cerdine. Thank you very much. Well, meanwhile, Scotland's women footballers will face a showdown with Switzerland in August, which should go a long way to deciding qualification for the 2019 World Cup. That's after Scotland came back from a 2-0 down to record a thrilling 3-2 victory away to Poland. Jonathan Sutherland reports.
In terms of Scottish football excitement, it doesn't get much better. In the 90th minute, Lisa Evans with the goal for Scotland to complete a stunning comeback to beat Poland 3-2.
Oh, it was fantastic. The manner in which the team won the game just made it such an exciting match to watch. Absolutely thrilled that we've came away with the 3 points, which sets Scotland up nicely to play Switzerland.
It was a thrilling finale in a match that looked to be drifting away from Scotland as Poland took the lead in the first half. A freakish cross-come shot from Cystic, bamboozling Scotland keeper Lee Alexander. And in the second half, Poland would double their lead. A moment to forget for Sophie Howard, an own goal as Poland made it 2-0. But Scotland would refuse to be beaten. With just 13 minutes left to play, Kim Little's free kick eluded everyone as the ball found the back of the net. And 3 minutes after that, Scotland were level. Jane Ross finding the finish to make it 2-2. Scotland would hit the woodwork twice as the search for a winner intensified before it finally arrived, just in time. A moment Lisa Evans will never forget that keeps Scotland's hopes of winning the group and qualifying for the 2019 World Cup very much alive.
In a very, very good position to maybe not top the group. That'll all come down to the game against Switzerland, I'm quite sure, but we're sitting in a good position to be one of the best second place teams.
Of course, when it comes to football, Scotland tend to do it the hard way, but the agony this time for the opposition. Next for Shelley Kerr's side, a massive match against Switzerland in August, but right now, a sensational victory for Scotland to savour. Jonathan Sutherland, reporting Scotland.
A piece of Hollywood memorabilia is currently being housed in an offshore equipment yard in Aberdeenshire. The 50-foot letter H from the original sign high on the Hollywood Hills is at the site in Old Meldrum, ahead of a world tour. Rachel Bell can tell us why.
An American landmark and a worldwide symbol of the entertainment industry. The original Hollywood sign stood for more than half a century before it was replaced in the 70s. 40 years on, the letter H has now found its way to this oil yard in Aberdeenshire.
My friend in the States, Bill Mack, who's the world's leading sculptor, bought the sign in 2000 as really an act of memorabilia purchase because he's a great Hollywood memorabilia collector, and what bigger star is there than the Hollywood sign.
In 2012, the H was recreated from the original panels as part of plans to send it on a worldwide tour set to begin in London next week.
The reason we brought it here was because it's a tremendously complex structure to erect. It's 160,000 pounds in weight, 50 foot tall. That's 4 double-decker buses stacked one on top of each other. And we thought it would be prudent to just have our engineers do a little bit of a trial and put it up here in Old Meldrum. Much to the locals' real interest, they've been quite taken with this because you can see it above all of the buildings.
The sign will visit up to 60 cities across the globe before it returns home to Los Angeles to become a permanent installation.
Back in the day, aspiring actors and actresses would climb the Hollywood hills and touch the letter H as a rite of passage and for good luck. It's hoped that over the next 5 years, millions of people will get to see this iconic structure and get a touch of Hollywood stardust for themselves. Rachel Bell reporting Scotland's Old Meldrum.
Well, just before we go to the weather, some footage of a rather unusual traffic jam. Have a look at this. The family of swans, they caused a big hold-up on the A90 during rush hour this morning. They were heading north near Cortes in Aberdeenshire. Right, hope you weren't stuck in that, but it was cute, wasn't it? Let's get the weather now from Christopher.
Jackie, thank you. Hello there, good evening to you. Well, a fairly pleasant day of weather for many of us today. Some sunshine, especially in the west and here down to the borders. Tonight, any showers in the east fade away. It's then largely dry. Fairly cloudy at times, some clear spells, and temperatures overnight around about 8 to 10 Celsius with light winds. But, there's always a but, there's change on the way because tomorrow we have low pressure moving in off the Atlantic, bringing heavy rain and high winds, but notice ahead of it just a brief ridge of high pressure. So for many of us during the day tomorrow, actually dry. Some early sunshine first thing, although the cloud will tend to build through the late morning and the afternoon. You'll notice behind me actually that weather front already producing outbreaks of rain for the Hebrides and the west coast, a strengthening southerly here. But by mid-afternoon for central and southern Scotland, still dry, cloudier compared with the morning. Temperatures up to 17, 18 degrees. There's that wet weather through parts of Argyll in towards the northwest and slowly just trickling eastwards. Fairly light across parts of the northeast at this point, but a heavier rain will edge its way further east as we go through tomorrow evening. Let's take a look at that, and you can see as we go towards tomorrow evening, the heavy rain will start to edge eastwards with high winds, and because of that, we have a Met Office yellow be aware warning in force for gales. So, taking a look at the pressure chart, you can see exactly what's going on. The low pressure system sweeping across the country, bringing outbreaks of heavy rain, and the tightly spaced isobars there indicating the high winds. And it will be a wet and a windy start to Thursday. Pulses of wet weather moving eastwards, and the winds, gale force, perhaps even severe gale force and exposure. Some disruption to travel, and of course, with trees in full leaf, we could see a few branches down as well. The afternoon somewhat drier, still showery at times, quite a fresh feel, quite a blustery afternoon. Friday, still breezy, this time from the southwest, fairly cloudy, a few showers in the northwest, some longer spells of rain later, and once again, feeling fresh. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And that's Reporting Scotland from Oliver's. Goodbye.